So welcome to ITE Career Connect with Kate. My name is Kate Whitfield and I'm a principal with Alta Planning and Design based in Ottawa. So the goal of each and every one of these episodes is to help people looking for jobs in Canada in the field of transportation engineering and planning. For this episode, we've brought together people from the active transportation section within the Transportation Planning Department at the City of Brampton. I find that people need access to information on what typical jobs are like in order to be able to represent themselves in job applications and sort of find a good fit for themselves. So when prepping for this episode, it became obvious that we could take this conversation in so many directions. Organizational structures of departments, what it means to have a job that is specific to sort of an active transportation portfolio, or even planning versus engineering roles and career paths. So we'll see where this episode takes us. I'm going to start with a short introduction for who has joined me today, but leaving it informal so we can get the conversation going and people can add in their own descriptions of themselves. So I'll go with sort of how I see people on the screen. So Fernanda is a project manager for active transportation. With a background in architecture and urbanism. So later on, we'll let Fernanda fill the rest of that story in. I see Peter, so a planning technician, also obviously within the transportation planning group, Masters of Planning from TMU, a member of OPPI. So we'll get him talking later about some of the planning work. I see Tyron on the screen here, transportation planner within that sort of active transportation portfolio. Has an engineering degree and brings that to the position. And later we'll hear sort of his story of getting the job. Also, I see Rowaidah, transportation planner, also with that engineering background. So I want to hear about that, having done an undergraduate from University of Waterloo. And the last person, the one that I've known the longest, is Nelson, a manager of transportation planning and a graduate of Transportation Engineering Technology program at Mohawk College. So hopefully I got that right, but we can explore that more as we get talking. So I think the best way to start, the sort of first theme, is type of work. So when we were talking about this to get ready, we sort of talked about active transportation section in a municipality while doing design work, policy work, communications work, education. That could be a bike to work month. But I think, Rowaidah, let's pass it to you. Maybe explain a little bit, expand on sort of what type of work you do in a typical week. We'll start there.
So usually we do this really big project where we do a review of all the existing infrastructure in the city and what needs to go in that year. And a lot of my job, especially in the summer, is managing that contract, communicating with the other departments, getting everything ready to get implemented in the summer. So we have more bike lanes, and that's based on the policy and direction from the active transportation master plan. So we take a little chunk of roads every year and we plan out how we're going to implement them and look at for those missing connections. So that takes a big part of my day. And also just communicating with other departments, providing guidance on the active transportation infrastructure, giving comments, getting people thinking about including AT.
That's great. And can you give me a quick sort of, so it was an undergraduate in engineering and sounds like some great co-op terms, a little bit of construction in there. I love it. And then bringing you to Brampton in this transportation planner role. So can you just fill that in, tell your own sort of short story there, if you don't mind?
Yeah, for sure. I think the great thing about water is that you get to taste a little bit of everything because there's a lot of co-op terms. And my favorite one was the transportation planning one I did with Wood Canada, now WSP, I believe. I really enjoyed it. I loved how it was a combination of both planners and engineers. So it was always creative. It was dynamic. There was a very vast range of projects, going from detailed design to something that's still in that initial planning phase. So you got to have a taste of a little bit of everything. And I like that sort of workplace. So when I first graduated, I did start off in a more of an engineering slash technical role, but I really enjoyed that different stages of projects and the exposure you can get. So it doesn't only have to be one thing. You don't only have to be making construction drawings all day long. And I really enjoyed that. So I decided to move into more of like a transportation planning, because I think that really has, you see it from finish to end.
Great, it does, that's great, and that finish to end, really in a municipal job. It sounds like a big part of that draw. So Tyrone, you were also an undergraduate in engineering. Can you tell the story of sort of your path to this transportation planning job with the city?
Sure. So I originally applied to my undergrad in civil at TMU because I really liked transportation growing up. And there was a path to kind of specialize into transportation, so I took it. But the thing is, I was always super interested in like public transportation and active transportation, and I feel like school was a little more focused on road infrastructure and highway infrastructure, which is great, but wasn't necessarily what I was looking for. And I did end up doing a co-op with TMU, and with TMU, at least for engineering undergrads, you have to do like either a 9-month or 12-month co-op. So I ended up doing a construction management for a long period of time, and it was great. But after graduating, I didn't really want to continue in construction management because I really did love transportation. And this was kind of during the pandemic, so I wasn't really eager to get into a workplace at that time. So I started volunteering with Bike Brampton, which is like a cycling advocacy group in Brampton. And it was kind of like a full-time job. I was like going out cycling around the city, like hosting pop-ups and whatnot. So it was a pretty good time. And eventually it got to the time where I had to like apply for jobs. So I was applying for jobs, and they made me aware of this position within the city. And somehow like the stars aligned and I got it.
That's great. And I guess my follow-up, just for, because everyone wants to hear real world sort of stories. So it was an open competition for a transportation planning job. You would have submitted, so you correct me after I do this, I imagine a cover letter and a resume, made it through, did an interview. Can you sort of fill that in? And if there was tests, if they asked you, do you have a bike? Like anything, real stories of that part of getting your job.
Yeah, I feel like it was pretty simple. Like it was an open competition for sure. Like I was made aware of the posting, but I still had to apply like everyone else. So submitted my cover letter, my resume. Thankfully I had people at Bike Brampton who could vouch for me in terms of just like providing references, and I had my references from my co-op, so that helped. And then it was just a pretty simple interview, just asking a lot about like transportation theory and practice, but also just things specific to Brampton and Brampton's own policies and plans. So just a bit of both, and I think I had a little bit of an advantage because I already live here. So, had some of that knowledge already.
That's really great. And for anyone questioning, I'm being a bit cheeky about the bike comment, but I get that a lot where people think in an AT field, you have to prove your commitment and love for the bicycle. And it's less about that and more about actually what Tyrone just said, like municipal policy, guidelines, approaches, language that sort of help you stand out when applying for that type of job. Okay, so Peter, we've heard from 2 engineering grads. You're our master's in planning. Also, I believe came through a co-op, but can you both do a little bit of your background and then your type of work and fill that story in?
Yeah, sure. So I guess first of all, the background. Yeah, I have a Master of Planning and Urban Development at TMU, formerly Ryerson. I have an undergrad degree also from TMU in environmental and urban sustainability, which is where I completed my undergrad, but I actually started with 2 years at Concordia University in urban studies. But between completing my undergrad and my master's, I was working at University of Toronto in a research role, unrelated. And then obviously the pandemic hit. At the time, I was on a rolling contract. And unfortunately, it just aligned, the stars aligned in the wrong way for me. And I was unemployed for a period of time. And then I realized at that point I should probably get a master's because I had been interviewing for planning positions or applying and interviewing, but not getting the position. So I knew that's kind of the way I wanted to go. And then I guess fast forward to, getting accepted in the program and then doing the internship. I got the internship because of a connection that obviously it was I guess you could call an internal posting within the school through a professor at the school, Dr. Raktim Mitra, who's a active transportation focused professor and researcher. And he had already kind of made that connection. And the internship I had at the city was actually initially supposed to be based around some kind of a work and research position, but the research didn't come to fruition for myself. So that's how I got my internship. And then I made a good connection. I think like with the internship, I saw as an opportunity kind of to like audition, hopefully for a post-grad job, at the very least, like make good connection and get a good reference. And then I was lucky enough that when graduation came, there was a vacancy within the department, and I was able to fill in a contract situation, and luckily that contract rolled over itself. And that's how I'm here now. And then I guess in terms of the work I do, it's somewhat similar, I think, to the work that Tyron and Rowaidah do. Well, I mean, I know it is, but maybe not so much of the big project stuff, but there's a lot of communication with residents. Also, some big project stuff like working on policy things such as like MMLOS, Brampton specific. Yeah, and I mean, I also to also say like I am not to be like an avid cyclist, but I one of the things that was like interesting was like in that pandemic time, I like started doing Uber Eats on my bike to like get some cash. So I had that in my back pocket. I knew what it's like to be a very regular cyclist in Toronto, but whatever.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I do think it's interesting when we were prepping that you, as a planner, work in microstation, because that would be something more typical for someone with an engineering background. And it really speaks to, well, so much speaks to the crossover between a planning background and engineering background in the contribution to jobs. There's no way it's perfectly aligned. One does engagement, one does not. You better be an engineer that can do engagement. But it's interesting on your path and then where things will head, because you will be eligible for your professional planning license, where Tyron and Rowaidah could choose to go for a PN. So that's kind of interesting, and what a city does with that type of different designations. But anyways, that's a great story. So Fernanda, can you fill in a little bit of your background, and then and anything you want on what the group does, and then I have another question after that, but this is the first part for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think I have the more unconventional, let's say, background in the group. I graduated in architecture and urbanism, as you mentioned, back in Brazil. And then I took the path to work with urban planning. I did a master's in urban design in Spain and worked there for a little while. And when I was back in Brazil, I was working basically with urban planning, regional planning. After that, I kind of fell in love with transportation and started working with a lot of integrated projects. So I decided to jump into the full master's in engineering, so transportation engineering specifically. And from there, I took the academia path. So I stayed in academia for a while, almost a decade, let's say. And I came to Canada specifically for my PhD at U of T. So I took the program there with Professor Eric Miller. He was my supervisor, and he was interested in having someone with a urban planning background in his team. And my research covered accessibility, land use and transportation integration, and a little bit of equity too. And then when that was done, I decided that I wanted to move back to the industry, but always looking for municipal, always looking for the public sector, because I had in Brazil an experience working with the city that I lived. And so I was looking for the public sector job. Applied for some consultancy as well, but ended up here.
Okay, so now I want to go a little small tangent. Any story about how you got your job, or any story about networking? Just what, just a tidbit of something? Because there's also your
Yeah,
story to get.
yeah, and I can say that at the time when I was finishing the PhD, I was a bit anxious, let's say, because I was for so long in academia, right? And I didn't have any Canadian experience, let's say. And during my final months at U of T, I remember having some coaching sessions with the grad school, just to prepare people who are transitioning from academia to the industry or public sector or private sector. And yeah, my path was like looking for job posts. I was more focused on public sector, as I mentioned. I applied. It was an open competition, just like Tyron and Rowaidah. So yeah, resume, cover letter, had an interview with the managers. And yeah, that's how I got here.
Great. So then, I mean, this is a fun episode because really people in the same episode are the ones that reviewed each other, the resumes and applications of the others in the call. And we also, it's quite obvious that everyone is fantastic. So that's not really where I want you to go with this. But in your opinion of someone applying for a job in transportation planning at a city, can you give a tip or two on what you're looking for when you see an application?
Well, I would say that on top of course, having all the technical skills that the position required, I also think that having, let's say, all the soft skills that complement you to work within the city's environment. So sometimes we have to deal with residents, for example. We have also to have some work with the advisory committees, sometimes council meetings. So having that, those personality traits, I guess, communication skills that prepare you to deal with like a customer service role when you're dealing with the public or public engagement, other stakeholders, or even during political discussions like in council, for example, giving them the support, like those communication skills and teamwork. Like Rowaidah mentioned, we have a lot of intersection with other departments within the city, have to work together with other people from other backgrounds. I think those interpersonal skills and communication skills are very important.
So I guess I'll have fun with that for everybody. So say I don't know you, right? I wasn't Tyron and Bike Brampton, and I didn't have a co-op. How do I, in my application, show you that I have those skills? So you could say like customer service through a different industry, because maybe I didn't have AT experience before, or even city. Anybody ideas on how someone demonstrates. So, writing style in your letter, but any brainstorming on how you show, how you represent that soft side, if we're going to call it that. Okay, Tyron, you're up.
If you need to like show your soft skills, I have like a lot of friends who are also applying for jobs at the same time. And remembering how I kind of went through that myself during the pandemic, I'm just like looking at a lot of resumes at this period, and I feel like just realizing that whatever job experience you have had in the past, whether it's a fancy corporate job or just working retail as well, all of them have a set of soft skills which are transferable anywhere. So just like really, not to say milk it, but milk it in your resume. Really like kind of reflect on what you're writing down in terms of experiences, see what soft skills there are, because inevitably you have to speak with people, right? And really leverage that in both your resume. And then I would also say, just like in your cover letter, ensure that one, of course, like it's being written well, right? Not just like haphazardly or rushed, because it is a chance for you to demonstrate how personable you are, like through writing, and also showing how well you do communicate. But speaking to that personable aspect, I don't know. I feel like for a long time, at least pre-pandemic when I was applying, I was a little bit too formal. And then I was doing a lot of research about like how to write resumes and cover letters, and one source was just like dial it down a bit and try and play a more like a personable individual. And I feel like that got me a lot of responses in my job search. I did like one of the weird things that they told me to do is like put a summary paragraph in my resume. And I was like, this is insane. This is crazy. And somehow when I got interviews, people would point that out. So give the summary paragraph a try, if anything. I think it shows a soft skill of being able to present yourself. My hot take.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. So many people use that opening for like, I'm detail oriented, enthusiastic, hardworking. Those are wasted words because they actually are so generic. They don't show any personality. So that was great. Okay, so Nelson, for you, I want a little bit on like actually writing a job posting and a little bit of like actually recruiting, if you could. And
For
then
sure.
I might come back with something else.
Okay. Yeah, job post difficult. Just given that AT, I think in Brampton specific is relatively new. And what happens with a new venture like active transportation, that we've done sidewalks and pedestrian facilities for years and years and years. The cycling needs a little bit of catching up to do. So it's the position or our group started in 2016, relatively new, and we find that we take on a lot of everything related to active transportation. So I mean, just by the diversity on this call here, you can see we've got planners, we've got engineers, we've got technologists. We need a little bit of everything because we're delivering the entire portfolio until the rest of the corporation sort of catches up, right? So we're doing the programming pieces, we're doing the educational pieces, the infrastructure pieces. So in putting that into a job posting, it's difficult because people don't really know what they're applying for. So we try to be, generically talk about transportation as a whole. The challenge with that is it attracts everyone from logistics to, civil engineers and that sort of thing. So it's really just the weaning out through, good cover letters. Tyron, I think, hit it bang on when you deliver a little bit of a story with that cover letter. When you're putting together a resume, don't include every project that you've worked on or all of the experiences. Just focus on the ones that lead to complete streets or something active transportation related, or something on the programming side that you've delivered, something that would match the job description a little closer.
Oh, I like that because that was like, you're trying to be broad to catch a variety of skills, but then too broad, then you're sifting through so many resumes that have nothing to do with it. That's really good. So then what catches your, actually, I'm gonna let Peter, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, this is also like to add to both of them, sorry. But in terms of like having applied to positions at postgrad and before, just like when I'm right, I found that if I really want a job, my cover letter is a bit more better. And I think that like it's like a tip is like, spend time. I know some people think like they need to apply to like 50 jobs a day or something, but that comes across, I feel like that this is just like a copy and paste job. And I feel like making a connection, like, and I'm obviously speaking from personal example, but like I know when I applied to the position at Brampton, I was like, I grew up in Mississauga. Like make yourself different, like have like Nathan's saying, and have a bit of a story that sets yourself apart. And yeah, I can say I'm hardworking and I'm a team, like good at teamwork or whatever, but that, probably everybody says that, but it's like, how am I different, and why do I want this job? Like, what is my connection? I just feel like making that like, yeah, personal touch and making clear that you actually read the difference in this posting between the other 50 that you might have applied to in the last couple of days.
It's really great. And that's a lot of these episodes talk about where you put your effort. So you feel demoralized because you've applied a million times, but you've applied generically a million times. And some places it's hard to figure out what is unique, and it takes effort to find out about the place you're applying. I get that. But some places it's not that hard. Alta would be an example of that. We're very much on social media. And then with the city, one idea I've tried, my first job is I use like a public meeting that I went to, or a public advisory committee that I got on, that started to show sort of an interest in the topic. So I'm going to go back to you, Nelson. Like, you're not a LinkedIn person, at least I can't really find you. So how does someone get, like, besides a cover letter, other ways of networking? Can you explore that a little bit? Like you were president of OTC.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to lead into, Kate. I think these opportunities that, whether it's IT events, where there's the best practice or sharing, experiences through work, get involved in those organizations, whether it's directly or somehow, attend one of the conferences, attend a training session, attend, lunch and learn, whatever it is from one of these organizations. It gives you an awesome opportunity to network. And then when you're at those events, make sure that you're sitting with someone you don't know. Make those connections that way. I've met so many people through my experiences through OTC, whether it's sitting, on the board or participating in the active transportation committee, the engineering committee. These are organizations that really thrive on new membership. So I know in the case of the OTC, they have, and I believe a couple panelists on this call are involved in the new professionals, or the young professionals committee. So great opportunity, and it's taking advantage of that opportunity, right?
That's great. So does anyone want to offer any other story of an organization or a way you networked? I just want to give a chance for that, because the best is sort of that personal example. If anyone wants to offer one up. Tyron?
So there was this, while I was still looking for work, I was having a lot of fun on LinkedIn. Because I'm not necessarily the most networky person, but the one good thing about LinkedIn is they actually provide a lot of researchers love to like post their research on LinkedIn and their presentations and webinars, and I'm a sucker for all of that. So I kept on, binge watching like webinars during that time. And then there was this one professor who kept his research, and I was like, how dare you? I just want to look at your stuff. So this was actually Peter's professor, and I had to follow him on LinkedIn But to follow him, I had to send a message. So I was just like, hey, I want to look at your research. Can you just let me through? And he was like, okay, you seem like you're unemployed. Do you want a summer student job? So that just happened. So I'd say, if you are passionate about things, maybe message people, because I was not expecting that at all. I just wanted PowerPoints.
That's great. That's great. And a little bit in there is people always ask, how do you message? And it's not always about a transaction or like, I want something. Sometimes it's just nice to be connected with you. And other times it can have some meat to it. And that's really fun. So just look at, we've covered a lot here. I mean, there's so much more that I'd love. Like you could do a whole episode on AT work versus other transportation. You could do one on an ad for a transportation planner and who can apply. And then my favorite is public versus private. So I see people very happy in the public sector, but I also see people that I'd love to be in the private sector. Does anyone want to comment on sort of applying to the public, like making a choice to apply to the public sector, and any sort of like advice on a job, getting a job in a city? Peter?
I mean, I can just say like briefly that if you're planning to apply to a public sector position, you really should give yourself a big lead. Because I find that the application and hiring process is quite a bit longer than the private sector. And I know I said previously that like in a cover letter, and I guess more so with a resume, like to like kind of be personable. I think that's still true, but you really, I think because public sector tends to get a lot more applicants, I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. They tend to look that you hit those notes, that are listed in the job application. So I think like it is good to ensure that both your resume and your cover letter are really designed for the position you're posting for. I'd say that's what I have to say on that topic.
Great. And Nelson, you want to add?
Yeah, if I can add one advantage when you're applying for public sector job is you have a scope, right? I mean, you're going to work for a city, you're going to work for a region, you're going to work for the province. So you have the advantage of getting familiar with that organization. So do a little bit of research, find out about, what their transportation master plan is aiming to do for the next 40 years, and share that interest in the actual city as well, right? I mean, it adds to the conversation. The more you can sort of make that connection with your interview panel, the better the conversation is going to go. That's great. And I personally never interviewed with a city. I've always wanted someone to let me be a fly on the wall, because I heard lots of things about how serious they are, where we can be a little more, I can go for a bike ride with someone or a walk. But I will say, one plug for the private sectors, I do think it's easier to get your licenses with the type of work exposure and access to professionals in the group. So I'm gonna make that one plug, but this is great about the public sector. Okay, so on that note, I just want to thank you, right, for joining me. This was fun. I was sitting with Nelson and said, hey, let's do this. And it was, I think it's been a year where I was like, hey, I'm serious, let's do one. And you're like, yep, everyone's willing. So I think that's wonderful. And then I think back, the first episode of Career Connect was August 2020. I still have the notes from the pilot. So on the ITE Canada website, we keep the list of recordings. Some might be from a while ago, but they're still relevant. And when people contact me for advice, I still sort of say, go back to them, because we explore being introverted or extroverted. We explore getting your resume noticed. We do the ones with the 3 people looking for jobs and 3 people employed. And then we do sort of the themed one. So there's a co-op episode and one on getting your PhD. I should have had Fernanda on that one. I missed opportunity there. We're looking to do one on planners in ITE as an association. So I'm looking for people for that one. And I also want to say, so Steve, we know, has retired from ITE Canada and he's missed. So we're also exploring sort of new formats as we do this. So it's continuing with ITE Canada, but
we'll sort of explore how to keep this going into the future. It's really fun and want to keep it informal like this. So again, thank you everybody for your time today. And I hope people enjoyed the episode.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.